Okay, so where we left off was kind of talking about our different policies, right? So we said there's really like, we have, if we want to give permissions, we know we have to create a role, which is kind of like our key card. We have to then wrap it in a profile, right? Just so that we can attach it to something like an EC2. So this is like giving the key card to our EC2 instance or letting it hold on to it. And in order to do that, we need to first set a trust policy that says, hey, we'll allow this kind of resource, EC2 resources, to assume the role. And what that really means is that we give the EC2 instance will like ask for a secure access token, or STS, the secure token service, and that will, that token is how it will take on the role. So this says, we can give it that token. And then for this key card to be worth anything, for it to actually give some capabilities, we need to attach, right, an IAM policy role. Here is creating the policy role. And we said before, like the main parts about this were the permissions. So you can, sorry, if I can zoom in. Okay, a little bit better. Right, where the permissions, where you can see like ECR, get authorization token. So we allow for this action to be performed and allow for this one and this one. And here the resource is saying, a resource is in the terms of policies is like what we're acting on. So here the resource is any ECR, any repository. Okay, so like if you hold on to this card, you can access any repository. So we saw two different policies, right? The trust policy, which is like this assume role policy, and then this identity policy, which is like attached to the key card. There's another kind of policy, right? There's one more. That's called a resource policy. The way a resource policy works is that it's attached. It's not like attached to this key card. Instead, it's attached directly to the resource itself. Okay, so we said that the key card, right? We said that the role is kind of like this key card, and this resource policy, that's kind of like a bouncer, like somebody like, are you on the list? Basically, are you on the list? Can you go in this room? That kind of thing, and it directly stands on the resource. So we can see that actually. Let me think of the best way. I think you can see that in Terraform first. So that's what I'm doing here. We're just, we already have a repository called app repo, and now I'm adding a resource policy that specifies who can access this repository. All right. So it's called an AWS ECR repository policy. That's a kind of resource policy. And then you can see how it works. We're saying, hey, on the app repo, specifically on this resource, you can do these things, right? Like, but not just anyone, right? If you think of like the bouncer analogy, it's not just anyone who can do these things, but just those that are attached, that kind of like are part of this EC2 resource role. So those who like have this key card, you have to have that key card or be one of these people to be able to perform these actions. Okay? And this is directly on the repository. And then like the last step is once we say, hey, if you have this this role associated with you, you can perform these actions. We just have to associate a role. Attach this role to some sort of EC2 machine or something like that. So that's just the rest of the code is like, now create that AWS EC2 resource access role that we said can access my ECR repository, create the profile to wrap the role in, and then attach the role. Attach the role to an EC2 instance. Okay. If you apply, so I already applied this. If you apply this, what's kind of interesting, what you'll see is in most of your repository, right, basically all of your repositories, you're not going to see any. So you can go to repositories and click on a repository like Flask app. And then if you go to permissions, you'll see the permission, right? The resource policies associated with our resource. So there are no permissions associated with this Flask app. But if we go to the one that we were talking about, right? It was this app repo, this guy, right? And I already called Terraform apply. So you'll see here I have my app repo, and now I'll go to permissions, and then here you can see, this is what this is saying, right? Is if you are this EC2 access role, then you can perform these actions. So this is different, right? This is different than what we were working with previously, where we were saying if you hold this key card, you can do these things. Now it's like if you specifying directly on the resource, if this thing matches, we'll let you perform these roles. It's the resource that's specifying it. Okay. You can have both. Like the question that immediately comes up to me is like, well, what if you have, if we have this resource access, this resource policy that says like, hey, these kinds of roles can come in. Does that mean everyone else cannot come in? Does that wipe out, let's say we have a separate key card that says, hey, I should be able to access this repo. Does that negate that? The answer is no. So if you have a resource policy that says can access app repo, and you have it separately an IAM policy, right? So I actually coded that out for you in the lesson. If we have a separate IAM policy that says, hey, here's my EC2 instance. Where's the actual policy? It's this ECR read-only policy. So these two things are not in conflict right now, right? This is saying, hey, I should be able to read anything, to read any ECR if I hold the repo, if I held this key card. And the resource policy says and also, anything from this EC2 resource access role, any of these guys can also have access. What happens is now both, it doesn't wipe out this extra policy. Both can access app repo. Okay, so this guy can access, if you hold this key card, you can access it because we're saying ECR read-only access. And if you have a resource policy that says people from this role can access it, they can access it too. What's different is that you can also have a resource policy that, let me show you this. You can have a deny resource policy. Okay, so then if you have a resource policy that says, hey, I want to deny access to anyone who is not on this list, who is not, like this EC2 resource access role, or typically you also want to add the admin, like your admin all access. So unless you're these two, I'm going to deny access, and I'm going to apply such that you cannot, get the batch image. You can basically not download this image and attach it directly to my app repo. If you have the deny access, then this thing gets wiped out. Then your IAM policy doesn't matter if you have a card saying that you can enter. If the resource policy has a deny access, such that this guy says deny, this guy says accept, the deny is going to win. Okay. So it's just, and how do I know that? Well, I've tried it, and I asked ChatGPT. When I tried it, all right, I did not apply admin access. I forgot to say, I was like, deny except if you are this special role. And the issue I ran into was then I did not give administrator access. And the problem with that is that when you call Terraform apply, let's say I want to change this, change the ECR policy so that I want to give more people access. Well, Terraform apply, you're logged in as the admin. And so the admin's not allowed to touch this repo anymore. And so then it just breaks. It says you don't have permission to do this stuff. So that's why you always want to also, if you're saying only this guy can enter, only this guy plus the admin. Okay? And you can see it has this, there's a couple different ways to give this kind of exception, right? I'm denying everyone except if the string, so long as the string does not equal, someone with a user ID of etc. You can also do like not principal, so long as you're not. If you look at the resource policy, you can see here we're allowing access only if you are a principal that has this role. You can also put like deny access so long as you are not, right? So no one can enter so long as, but no one can enter, but I'm not applying this to those that are the principal, right, that have access. It's like the same effect. All right. So that's it. That's the resource policy. The reason why we need to go through this is because they apply to S3 buckets like all the time, and S3 bucket like probably the resource that you'll be most working with are S3 buckets. In S3 buckets, you have like typically you'll have a resource policy on them specifying who can access it, who cannot, right? And even if you have if there's a conflict, right? So if you say I'm denying access, to a bunch of things, to like basically everyone, an identity policy that says I get access, that's not going to override it, right? Cool. So that's it. That's the last kind of like permissions lesson for now.